Hi, class. Today we're talking about the two different types of conflict that were described in chapter 5. So, those are substantiative conflict and relationship conflict. So, substantiative conflict typically happens when you're talking about a process or some type of desired outcome or goal. Often that happens in business and in everyday life, right? So, I'm going to use an example. When I was working, we had a customer that his airplane had not passed a test that was required to make it airworthy, and it was the landing. It was part of the landing gear on a small little airplane, and there was a microscopic crack in it, and so because of that, the part needed to be replaced in order for the airplane to be airworthy for the maintenance shop that I worked for to return it to service. And so there was a scenario in which the customer was there to pick up the plane after the repair because he did authorize it. And it was myself, the maintenance manager, and the chief inspector. And the chief inspector's job is he signs all the logbooks that say that the airplanes are airworthy after they've come in for inspection and or repair. And the customer was adamant that he didn't necessarily believe that there was a crack and he wanted the part back, right? Because he said, well, I had to pay for a new one and that's mine. That was on my plane, so it's mine. And it's not that straightforward and simple. And so um, it was a dye test, right? So it's a microscopic. It's not to the eye. We take the part out, we send it out to another company that runs it through testing, and then they send it back and they'll say it's a pass or a fail, and it failed. And so it's not safe to have that on the landing gear. So in addition, when you're dealing with airplane parts, you cannot, as the FAA repair station, you can't give back an aircraft part that's not airworthy. It's not safe. So the only way to do that is to either disassemble it or obstruct the part so that it can't physically be installed back to the plane. So if he wanted it back, we would have had to literally like cut it, chop it up, and give it to him back in pieces. And that's just like the rules of the game, right? Like that's what the FAA says, and that's what we abide by. And so, anyways, we said, well, we can't give it back to you, and he thought we were just trying. I think he thought we were trying to like take a part off, and then we were gonna like sell it to another plane later, which is just not how it works. And the conversation got very escalated. I almost thought that he and the other two gentlemen in the office were. I mean, I felt like it was going to get borderline physical. I'd never been in a situation where it was getting that heated. And so I asked the chief inspector, "Can you please go pull our repair station?" Right? I mean, it's a huge authorization from the FAA, and it gives us the parameters of what we can and cannot do. And in there, it does state about the parts, and we can't return it to him. And so we had a big conversation, and I used a rights-based approach because that's the law, right? I mean, we're going through the FAA requirements, and then also an interest-based approach. I tried to really empathize with him. I explained to him, I understand you're frustrated. I understand that for you, this isn't, you can't see it, and I know I can't either, but I can guarantee you that this is really what is happening. And I explained, I'm sorry, I apologize that we have to have so many difficult conversations with you. And, that I understand you're also a new aircraft owner, and this is just really part of being an aircraft owner and how much money goes into these airplanes. So anyways, I was able to, needless to say, I was able to de-escalate the conflict. And he was appreciative and grateful that I explained everything to him in detail, and that we came to a common ground, and he felt confident that we were operating really and truly in his best interest and only charging exactly what, for the work that we actually did. That was, it was warranted for sure. Um, Another example is, excuse me, is relationship conflict. Those typically are dysfunctional. It usually has to do with like a false perception of somebody. So you can meet somebody, the book says too, you can meet somebody and they just rub you wrong, or you just, they say something, and so you make all these, judgments and preconceived notions because something that they said when you first met them you didn't like. So now there's all these reasons we have in our minds that we don't like that person, and vice versa. That happened to me at work. when, you know, we had hired somebody new, and I myself had only been there for a couple months, and she didn't really care for me too much. She had complained about me, um, because I was authoritative, and I wasn't technically her. I mean, I wasn't her boss at all, but that's just how I speak and how I am about, you know, getting things done, and I'm aware of my approach. So I wasn't necessarily surprised or offended that she didn't care for me, but I also I was unbothered by it at the same time. Um, but over time, you know, we ended up really getting to know each other, and um, you know, she actually, I don't know what it was. Well, I'm sure it was my approach and the way I spoke, but for me, she reminded me of my great aunts, and culturally, and just the way they were very just old school and judgmental. And so I assumed she was just like my family members that I didn't care for too much. But um, over time, we got to know each other, and we became incredible friends, which is really funny. One of my favorite people in the world, and it's just funny how that works. So, um, anyways, those are the two examples. And obviously, relationship conflicts can go the other way, as can substantiative conflicts. Sometimes they result, all, you know, they can go, you know, like the book said, there's that spectrum. And it can go all the way to litigation, and you're now suing one another, and you're putting it, you know, you're putting the resolution in the hands of the law as opposed to the two parties trying to negotiate. And obviously, the goal is to never let it go to litigation, because that's when everybody loses money. Typically. Anyways, thanks.